Hello, everyone, and welcome to Move Crush Count. Today's interview is sponsored by J&L Marketing, digital marketing agency helping business leaders outsmart and outmarket their toughest competitors, not outspend them. With J&L Marketing, you move the crowd, crush the competition, and count the money. I want you to make sure you check out movecrushcount.com for more on new episodes, and make sure you hit that subscribe button so you get notified for future guests and new episodes. The title of today's interview is Secrets to Client Retention Success. And I'm excited about this. We've got a great expert on hand. Dave Boyle from Tire Profile, soon to be changed, by the way, and we'll let him talk about that in a little bit. I don't want to put the cart before the horse. We're also joined by a frequent guest on this show, Mr. Sandy Cerami, the solutionist out of the great state of New Jersey. How you doing, Sandy?
All right, guys, what's happening?
Well, we're pumped about this. So today we're going to talk with Dave, and he's going to talk to us about selling tires and how that can help improve owner loyalty. What I love about this and how it translates to other industries as well, Dave, and I want you to get specific on the tire stuff, but if you're not in the auto industry and you're listening to what you're going to talk about today, it kind of reminds me of the book, Who Moved My Cheese?
Right.
If we can get into that, I think that'll make more sense once we start talking. But if you want to increase your active customer base, if you want to increase your average transaction value, if you want to increase how often the frequency people buy from you, which are the only three ways you can grow a business, straight from Jay Abraham, this is the show you want to tune into and you want to pay attention to. So once again, we're going to discover the secrets to client retention success. Welcome, Dave Boyle.
CEO Dave Boyle, baby.
Thank you, guys. Good to see you, boys. How are you?
Doing outstanding.
Excellent.
Always great to have you on here.
It's good to be on here, guys.
Listen, I always start this off because not everybody knows who you are yet. So I want them to get an idea of where you came from, how you became a client retention expert. And if you can give us a little bit of your background, your education, and then we'll dive into some questions.
Sure. I'm sort of I'm the reluctant car guy. I didn't set out to be in this business. I was way back in the beginning of my adulthood, I guess. I had the aspirations of making my living racing cars, and actually did that professionally for 9 years, and then realized I just wasn't good enough, and decided to go get a real job. And when I got a real job, I leveraged some relationships that I had from the racing side and ended up in this industry, and fell in love with it from day one. Loved this business, and in particular, I love the service side. I mean, I told somebody the other day, I've been in this business for 30 years. I don't think I can tell you how to sell a car. I have spent my entire career on the parts and service side. I love that side of the business. To me, it's the real meat of the business. I think it's very sort of timely right now that we're talking about this stuff as it relates to retention as well, Scott, because as you said, things are changing and changing rapidly. As if and a lot of people are probably saying as if they haven't changed enough already in this industry. But I think the changes we're about to see in the next decade are going to make the last 40 years look like nothing happened. And a lot of it does relate to the dealer's fixed side of his business and how he's going to navigate this and ultimately be successful.
So when you say that, why do you say that? When you say, I mean, I know things seem to be changing and they're getting quicker and quicker, but what makes you make that statement, make that claim?
Well, let me start by saying what I'm going to tell you I'm not saying by saying that. Everybody, the easy thing to talk about right now in terms of change is EV and, ICE engines are going away and it's going to change the world. And, is it going to change everything? Sure, it's going to change everything. But listen, it's still a car, and we're going to figure out a way to sell cars, and we're going to, it's going to change the way we service them slightly. But to me, there's a bigger thing at play here, and it has to do with the consumer, and the type of consumer. When I say specifically the changes that are taking place, I'm talking about this next generation of consumer. Okay, our kids. Okay, guys that grew up, with an iPhone in their hand. They're going to change the not just our industry, but they're going to change the world in terms of how they interact with businesses. And I think we saw glimpses of that through this pandemic. We saw what it was going to look like potentially, but in the next decade, we're going to see everything from touchless, remote this, digital that. I mean, everything is going to change as far as I'm concerned. And dealers have done an okay job figuring out how to navigate that side of that's change on the sales side of the business, but we're light years away from being able to deliver that type of experience and provide what consumers are going to want. This next generation of consumers are going to want, on the service side. And that's scary to me because, as that pertains to retention, that's where it gets challenging.
Well, it's where the dealer's client spends or invests most of their time. Most of the relationship is in the service department or parts department. And so I guess my question to you is, why is it? Why is it that I guess all the attention seems to be put on the front side of the store in sales?
Well, I wish I had an answer to that question, Scott. If I did, I would probably retired a long time ago. So listen, you and I were talking, off camera a little bit about this and, how I sort of staked out my niche, if you will, on the retention side. And that was a bit by accident as well. I remember when I first started in this business, my boss, my mentor, a guy named Les Silver, who you guys both know, a guy that's done a lot in this industry. One of the first things he did was he handed me a book written by Carl Sewell, Customers for Life. Obviously, everybody in this industry has read it. I had not read it up until that point because I wasn't really in the business. And it was one of those things that sort of changed my life, if you will. I remember reading the book and I remember thinking, well, this is just the greatest business in the world, right? I mean, you sell somebody a car and then for the next 5 to 7 years, you sell them stuff that they need. And if you do that well, you get to sell them another car. I mean, it can't get much simpler than that, right? And then I got in the business and I realized, but that actually is not how it works. Okay. So we sell them a car and then we provide them some level of service for the first few years. And then we screw it up royally. And then they go away. And then we have to fight and claw and spend money to try to get them back to sell them the other car. The concept that Sewell talked about with his wheel and his customer for life. And you spend this much of the time, courting that relationship when you sell a car and this much of the time when you're servicing the car. It all made sense to me, except when I started working with dealers, nobody was really making that work, right? Service, right. And I'm talking back in the 80s, right? I mean, late 80s, early 90s, service was still an afterthought. And I personally think, and I may offend some people by saying this, but I'm going to say it anyway, the vast majority of guys in our business, dealers, general managers, and things like that, they're still giving that sentiment lip service. These guys like to say that they're engaged with their service department, but how do you define that? So, okay, so you spend a bit more time in your service department than you used to, which means maybe, an hour a week instead of a half an hour a week or whatever. But if they only managed that side of the business the way they managed the front side of the business, it would be a different world for them. And I said this a couple of years ago. I was speaking at an event, and I one of the things that I said, and I didn't realize that was somewhat controversial, but I made the comment that this whole front back thing is going to change, and the back's going to become the front, and the front's going to become the back. And I see dealers of the future, basically big service centers on the street and a parking lot out back where we've got some cars that we test drive. And everything is purchased to order. You go online, you configure your car, you ship it, we drop ship it to the driveway, and showrooms and all of that stuff, I think, are going to eventually go away. And the brick and mortar side of this business is going to be service
or minimized.
Yeah. I mean, don't go away. That's a strong statement, but I think that, we won't have these Taj Mahal showrooms with, 30, 40 cars in them. Because again, one of the things I think is going to change in our world is the consumers are going to be more demanding of customization and personalization. They're going to want to build it to their spec, and have it dropped off in the driveway. So you're not going to need a whole bunch of cars on your lot. You're going to need a few for people to road test, and then you're going to order them a car and ship it to them. You know, and the question that begs is, what does these facilities look like, and what the dealers' businesses look like? And there's so much untapped service potential out there for these guys that they could take every square foot they've got of facility and turn it into a repair shop, and they still wouldn't be able to handle all the work that they could have if they wanted to.
You know, Sandy and I were talking earlier on another call, and we were talking a little bit about client retention, owner loyalty, things like that. And we did a study once, 400 different dealerships. And if I don't have these numbers in front of me, so I'm going to go by memory. But it was 400 something dealerships.
Disclaimer, Scott. I don't want you to hurt yourself. Go ahead.
Anytime I go by memory, if you start seeing me stress or some veins starting to pop up here, just give me some type of signal. So
and don't forget, you got to be back to the home by 4:00. So make it quick.
So it was like 400 something stores. So it was, and these were spread out all over the country. I think the average previous client database side on average was between 26 and 27,000, somewhere in that range. So decent size stores. And so if your store is smaller than that, you can just prorate, you can do the math, or if it's larger, obviously the numbers increase. But I think it was like every month, 1.1% of that 26,000 and some odd 26 to 27,000 customers, 1.1% every month bought a new car somewhere. Right. So that comes to a little over 200 something cars, I believe, 290 something. Yeah. And so then you've got 1.49%, I want to say it was, that are buying a used car every single month. So you're looking at close to 400 something cars. The total came up to like 690 something total cars between new and used. Here's the kicker. The average store that we measured only sold like 75 new cars a month and only 57 used. So even if, you know, the 130, whatever, I don't know what 57 and Sandy, quickly, what's 57 and 75?
Is 122, buddy.
So the average store sells 122. 132. Yeah. All right. So even if they sold 100% to prior clients, you're still looking at well over 500 cars a month right out of their previous client database that are buying a vehicle every single month
from someone else
at another dealership.
Absolutely.
From someone else.
And I wouldn't be surprised if the numbers are more startling than that, to be honest with you. If you think about the options that are out there, and even today with the Carvanas of the world and stuff like that, there's so many more options for people to buy cars. It's not through the new car dealer channel, particularly if they're looking at used cars. You know, Scott, you asked me a question. You said, why are guys so fixated on the front side of the business? And I think the answer is simple. I mean, it is the so-called sexier side of the business. You know, I mean, when we like to say we're car guys, where it's about cars, right? It's about selling cars. But I think it's deeper than that. You know, when I got in this business, it was ingrained in me by dealers that sales feeds service. All right, I got to keep selling cars because that's what keeps my service department going. And I actually remember it was actually during the sort of initial phases of COVID. I was sitting talking to a good friend of mine who's a service manager at a dealer here in town, and I asked him, you know, how things were going, and he said, "God, we got to start selling some cars because, you know, if we don't sell cars, it's going to decimate the service department." Meanwhile, I'm looking over his shoulder at the service drive, and it's packed full of cars, and I think that, you know, that I've always believed that that's the wrong sentiment. Service drives sales rather than sales drives service. There's so much more service work out there. And if you just captured more of the service work, you'd sell more cars. You'd have more cars than you'd ever need to worry about, because, you know, you don't give them an opportunity to defect, which is what, you know, we're here to talk about today primarily, is how do we, you know, another way of saying, you know, retention is not to allow defection, right? If we can stop people from defecting, even at the smallest percentage, if we can stop people from defecting, the trickle effect that it has to their business is massive.
Correct. You said something a little bit earlier. I don't know if anybody caught it. I know Sandy didn't, but I did. The so, let me ask you this. Let me ask you this. You said you kind of, I don't want to use the word luck, but you said something along the lines, you kind of lucked into this client retention. It wasn't what you originally, when you started Tire Profiles, that the client retention piece wasn't necessarily what you were going after. Talk to us about how that came about.
Well, it was actually
how all of a sudden are you all about client retention, right?
Well, it actually goes back to prior to Tire Profiles. I mean, in my previous business to this one, which was MPI, the company that sort of pioneered the digital inspection space, that business was all about, we figured out that it was all about client retention because, a multi-point was a way to keep the customer coming back as oil change intervals were getting longer and the repair work was going away. We had to figure out a way to drive more work and drive customers or keep customers in the fold at the dealer level and not let them get into the aftermarket. And when I left that company to start, we started Tire Profiles, there was I remember this moment, Sandy and Scott, like it was yesterday. I remember one of the last things I did when I left my former company was I had one of our data analysts run some queries on massive amounts of vehicle inspection data that we had. And we did an analysis on tire sales because it was, to me, it seemed like one of the natural biggest opportunities for dealers. And I remember looking at the data thinking, oh my God, have I stumbled onto something here? Because first of all, the amount of tire sales that were sold by comparison with all the other op codes that we tracked was a fraction of 1%, a fraction of 1%. And one of the things that we had in this data was we were able to look at, the technician inspections in terms of the measurement of the tire, the tread depth of the tire. And I saw some interesting things when we drilled into that data. One of the things that I saw was that apparently in most of the dealerships in this country, tires actually can grow tread over time. I guess you sprinkle a little bit of water on it and they grow like a tree. But you'd have tread wear that would go down and then all of a sudden magically go back up a couple of 30 seconds and then go down. And obviously that's just inaccurate measurements by technicians. And I remember thinking to myself, well, no wonder they can't sell any tires. They can't even figure out how to measure them properly. And that was really the impetus of why, we got going with Tire Profiles, which is now Traction, by the way, in thinking that, this is the major defection point for the consumer. One of the things that we learned very early on was that if you look at the sort of the typical graph of defection, dealers have a pretty good retention rate up until about that, 30,000 mile, 35,000 miles, between 30 and 40,000 miles is when the retention really starts to drop off on a vehicle. And the natural assumption has always been that's when the sort of the bumper to bumper warranty ends and they the consumer starts to creep out into the aftermarket thinking, well, I can get it done. I don't have to go back to the dealer if something's not covered under warranty. I can get it done elsewhere. And what I gleaned from that was, though, that it's not has anything to do with the warranty. Because let's face it, cars are built today. It's not like at 30,000 miles, all of a sudden your car's falling apart and you need a whole bunch of work done and you need to run back to the dealer. What smacked me in the face when I looked at the data was that the time frame of when that first tire needed to be replaced almost overlapped perfectly with when the warranty ended. So the question is not when the customer's leaving, it's why they're leaving. What are they leaving for? And the first time that the consumer has to reach in their wallet and spend any real amount of money on their car at the end of the bumper to bumper warranty period is when they got to shell out $400, $500, $600 for a set of tires. And that's the key. That's the linchpin in all of this, guys. That's the key defection point. You've got this sort of double whammy where you got the end of the warranty period and you've got the tire need. And on top of that, dealers have never really been good at promoting themselves as being in the tire business. So it's sort of a natural, where the door's already open and the consumer just walks through it, and they end up at a Discount Tire or an NTB or a Big O, because that's where they think they go for tires. And then when they're there, they realize, oh, these guys do brakes and alignments and everything else too. And that's the first, that's the first chink in the armor, if you will, where the dealer starts to lose that customer.
And that's where I was going with the book, Who Moved My Cheese? Because I do think for the longest time, we just assumed, because the easy data point to say was, oh, well, all right, the warranty's expiring, right?
Right.
And then I started thinking, and you and I have talked about this before on the Who's Moved My Cheese thing, or My Cheese, whatever the title of the book is. I can't remember. I read that a while ago. I read that back when
it's called.
I read that. I gave that to Sandy. I gave that about 10 years ago to Sandy for her 65th birthday, but I can't remember. So
I knew it was coming. That was one of those pitches that you could see from like back here, right, Sandy? You could just see.
It's the only reason I brought the book up.
I remember when we published the Bible, people said that book was never going to catch on.
Doesn't hurt. It doesn't hurt here. It doesn't hurt here. It's right here.
right here. Exactly.
Right here.
I want to just interject a quick point, Scott, because Dave is right. There is that overlap between the expiration of the manufacturer's warranty and when they're just about to need a new set of tires. But there's another factor that has to be taken into consideration. I did some work with Gulf States Toyota years ago, and we did an analysis of 30K pricing. Okay, 30,000 mile service pricing when interval maintenance services were a bit more in focus than they are today. And one of the things we noticed was that we had prices that ranged anywhere from $199 up to $2,000 for a 30,000 mile service, because everybody had a different interpretation. And believe me, we had 16, 17 fixed operations directors and service directors in the group. So we had literally 15 or 16 different prices up there, and they were kind of bunched up in the middle, one at the really low point, one at the really high point, but a lot bunched up in the middle. That was the first time that you were asking a client for significant investment in the service and maintenance of their vehicle. And so that actually impacted the defection piece of it as well. How you handle that 30,000 mile service, because then if you back that up with a tire sale, you could be talking literally $2,000-$3,000 worth of service and maintenance in a pretty short period of time.
Well, I also think, because I know Dave has talked about this before, and I want to bring this up, and the reason I brought up the book. In the past, a dealer, to try and either win back or retain a client, would offer a low price point and or a loss leader on oil changes, right? But the reality is, as time moves on, there's going to be, well, first off, we don't have to change our oil as frequently as we used to, which is a big blow to that strategy. Someone might be changing their tires and they're not due for an oil change because they don't have to change them every 3,500 miles the way they used to, right? But the other factor in the oil change scenario is more and more electric cars are built. You're going to see less oil needed, period.
Listen, I've been around, and I'm old enough. I'm definitely not Sandy's age, but I'm older than you, Scott. I'm old enough to remember when dealers fought tooth and nail about, the 1995 oil change. I remember that. I remember when Jiffy Lube came out with the 1995 oil change, and the dealers thought the sky was falling. It's like, what? How can you do this? And then all of a sudden, and now and I challenge any dealer that doesn't believe this to do it, price shop yourself on oil change. I guarantee the dealers are the cheapest in town right now. We overplayed that hand big time. I mean, we've gone way too far in the other direction. It's more expensive to go to a Jiffy Lube right now and get an oil change than it is the average dealer. But the dealers took forever to get on board with that. And it took them realizing that, this is the, I did a presentation not that long ago, and I used the analogy of milk in a grocery store. And it's a perfect analogy, right? We're talking about cheese. Let's switch to milk for a second here. It's the perfect analogy. If you think about if you think about this scenario, right? This is what it's like to buy a car, in a tire, I should say, in a car dealership in most cases today, right? You go to the grocery store, you pick up some stuff for date night with the wife, and you grab a bottle of wine and a couple of steaks, and while you're there, you're going to grab some staples like some milk and bread and whatnot. And you go to the checkout counter, and the lady at the counter says, "Well, I'm sorry, Mr. Joseph, I can't sell you the milk today. We don't sell milk anymore around here because we don't make a lot of money on milk. It's sort of a loss leader, and we kind of lose money on it. So why don't you go across the street to the convenience store and get your milk? I'm happy to sell you the steaks that I make lots of margin on, but I really just don't want to sell milk anymore." And that's what the message that we give to consumers when we quote a tire. When we quote a tire and we put gobs of margin in it, and we're $50 more in some cases than the tire shop down the street, and we wonder why the customers head out the door. And what we need to realize is that you got to sell the milk to keep selling the steaks. You got to keep people coming back with more frequency, and that's what the tire does. That's what the oil change did, and the dealers finally realized that. And the tire is, write this one down, boys, the tire is going to be the next oil change. It's going to be one of the reasons for the visit. We're not going to have oil change as the trigger for the visit anymore when we have EVs and even now today, some of these cars have, 30, 40,000 mile service intervals on oil changes. I mean, you're lucky if you see the customer one or two times in the first 4 or 5 years of ownership to do an oil change in some cases. So we've got to find something to replace that reason for the visit. And I'm going to give you another statistic here that a lot of people don't realize. This comes right from the tire industry. The average consumer replaces tires every 18.2 months. Now, when I first heard that data point, I thought that doesn't make sense to me because tires last more than 18 months. And basically what it is that tires don't get replaced in sets of 4s. Tires get replaced in sets of 2s typically. Because whether you got a front wheel drive or a car, rear wheel drive car, depending on whether you've got type of suspension that you've got, either fronts or rears are wearing out faster than the other. So you replace the fronts 2, and then 18 months later, you got to replace the next 2. And then you basically get on a cadence of about every 18 months, about every year and a half, you're replacing 2 tires. This is where dealers have such a massive opportunity, because if you're replacing 2 tires in that sense, then OEM fitment is a big deal, right? Because you want to make sure you match up the tires. OEM fitment, the dealer knows the OEM fitment better than anything. Because here's what's going to happen. You're going to go into the aftermarket. They're going to lowball the guy. They're going to put an inexpensive set of tires on, and they're going to sell them 4 when they only need 2. And this is where there's, and I know I'm kind of glossing over some of this stuff in terms of what it means, but this is where dealers have such a huge advantage if they just played the hand that they've got. And that's quite frankly where a lot of this ends up in terms of tire sales ultimately leading to retention, is that these guys are just not leveraging the position that they're in, which is, in my opinion, a position of strength. If they just did a few things differently than they've done them for years, kind of like, it finally took them to realize what with oil changes that they, that if they offered a loss leader oil change, it would net itself in a lot more business for them. They've got to come to that kind of realization. They got to use the tire, as the reason to get the customer to come back in, and then keep them coming back, and then ultimately sell them another vehicle.
Dave, I think it's a brilliant point.
Go ahead, Sandy.
Well, I was just going to say, I think it's a brilliant point because, we talk about share of wallet. Dave, you and I have had this conversation a whole lot in terms of share of wallet in the service drive. It becomes a real competence inhibitor for a service advisor, right? We can talk all day long about the numbers, statistics, the dollars, all of the KPIs. At the end of the day, we got to get into the 6-inch space in between the ears of service advisors and service directors, and obviously FODs and GMs and dealers as well. But to understand that a lot of times the challenge is share a wallet. You've got other services that are going to be recommended at the same time that are going to eat into that share of wallet. They're higher margin items. And a lot of times there's a hesitancy on the part of the service advisor to present the tires because it blows up the presentation in their minds, right?
Right.
But when you take it and break it in half and realize that you're spot on, that you're really only replacing 2 tires at a time, it lessens the blow. It makes it a lot easier to have that conversation. And I think that that's a key point. I hope dealers that are listening and GMs and FODs and service directors are making that note right now, because that should be a key part of your training with your service advisors. They'll be more confident making those presentations.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, that goes for any business that's listening. I sit here and I'm listening to this and I'm thinking to myself, this is business and marketing 101.
Mm-hmm.
And what I mean by that is this. It has always made sense you can have a loss leader and either keep a customer or attract a new one even. It's a good way to get conquest business. But that only works on the math side when you know your lifetime value of your customer. And most businesses, I don't think, really understand or know their exact lifetime value of their clients. If you know the lifetime value of your client on average, then it doesn't scare you. You're not sitting there saying, oh, well, this tire, I'm not making money on tires. And by the way, another part of business 101 and marketing 101 is when you have a loss leader, let's say, and I'm not saying tires are a loss leader, but you've already said they're thin margin, right? And dealers have complained the margin's not high enough. And I just show the record for our audience. You don't sell tires.
No.
So you're not in here trying to sell tires. You're trying to explain from a client retention standpoint, a better way to do business and what they need to pay attention to. And so, but if you have something of low margin that people need and or want, and it has the opportunity to help you retain clients, there's cross-selling opportunities to where you can get a little bit better margin from that, correct?
For sure. And I mean, and the perfect example of that, Scott, is the alignment. You know, when we went to loss leadering oil changes in 1995, we had to scramble to find things that sort of, you know, went with the oil change that we could also sell and help improve our margins. The beauty of the tire is there is a built-in add-on sale. Anybody will tell you, you never put two tires on a car without doing an alignment. It's good insurance for the consumer. You know, why replace the tires if there's a potential alignment concern, even a minor alignment concern, that could prematurely wear out that investment that you just made? You know, it's a relatively inexpensive, you know, $100 or whatever insurance policy for the consumer. And it should be one of the easiest things that a service advisor has to sell. So if you look at this from the standpoint of, I'm selling, for every tire I sell, I'm also selling an alignment, and then you blend the margin, then it's not a bad operation, because alignment is all margin, you know.
Correct.
So they're not, you know, but again, these are things that take time for people, you know, to get their arms around. And it took years for people to really truly understand the power of a loss leader oil change, and what it could do in terms of driving overall service visits and retention, and ultimately the next vehicle sale. You know, and that's what we do here at my company, is that we're beating that drum. We're trying to tell everybody that, you know, the next trigger, or the next oil change, if you will, is tires. And the best part about this for dealers is there's nowhere to go but up. You know, every year the Tire Industry Association publishes data and statistics on market drivers and market share. And one of the things they publish every year is the percentage based on channel. And the dealer channel enjoys about a 7 to 8% market share of the replacement tire, their tire space. So, you know, the dealers are only getting 10% of, less than 10% of this massive opportunity anyway. So there's really nowhere to go but up. And again, it's not about selling the tire, because if you sell the tire, you keep them coming back. And then ultimately, you know, when it comes time to sell them the next vehicle, then you got likely less advertising and acquisition spend to try to get that customer to come back. You've got all those things that should be factored into this decision. And I think it was Cox Automotive that published some really interesting data. And I don't have this data in front of me, so please don't blow up my phone, everybody, if I get these numbers wrong. But it was something to the effect of, if a customer has visited your service department at least once in the 12-month period prior to making a purchase decision, if they visited once in that 12-month period, they were 74% likely to buy from the servicing dealer. If they didn't, they were only 32% likely to buy from that dealer. is there another data? I mean, am I missing something? Is there another data point that you need to be talking about with dealers? I mean, yeah, you got a 50 percentage point swing, and all you got to do is keep them coming back to your service department for service, and you're going to increase your likelihood of selling them another car by 50%. I mean, again, it goes back to my earlier comment when I read Carl's book. It's sell a car, service a car, sell a car. Wash, rinse, repeat. I mean, you just keep doing that, right? And if you focused on that piece in the middle, that big window in the middle where you have all of that opportunity to solidify your relationship with that consumer as a business, if you focused on that, then the two pieces on each end where I'm selling them a car, that becomes the easy part.
I love when you quote data. I'm a big believer in just paying attention to the data and the insights it provides. You've already said that the data and the insights you learned is what gave you your big breakthrough and realization of this opportunity when it came to client retention in terms of auto. As you started to make that shift and kind of started presenting these numbers and potential solutions and ideas to dealers in terms of selling tires as a way to retain more clients, what were some of the roadblocks that you faced early on, and how'd you overcome them?
Well, the biggest roadblock, Scott, is what we've been talking about, and that's, I don't make any money. And, listen, car dealers are some of the most savvy entrepreneurial people I've ever met in my life. And part of what makes them that is they're greedy SOBs, right? They want to make money wherever they can, and I get it. But sometimes you got to take a half a step back to see the bigger picture. And in many cases, they do that, right? They do that. There's examples of them stepping back and saying, well, listen, you want to make a little bit less over here. I'm going to make a lot more over here. And there's tons of examples of them doing that in their business. This just doesn't happen to be one of them for some reason. And I think part of it, again, boils down to the fact that the guy that is able to see the big picture, the dealer and the GM, and here's my message to those guys, is that they're just enough removed from that type of decision. And the guys left to make the decision on those types of things for their business, their service managers, fixed operations directors, parts managers. Parts managers play a big role in this, right? I mean, there's a lot of parts managers out there whose pay plans alone make it detrimental for those guys to put tires on the shelf, right? If those guys are getting paid off margin and, I've got something that takes up a ton of room in my parts department and it's going to dilute my margin, which is going to impact my pay negatively. I mean, what's his motivation for doing that, right? So there's some bigger picture things that need to be figured out at a macro level at the dealership in order for these guys to be able to get their arms around this and be successful. And that was our biggest challenge, was getting the guy that could make those macro level decisions, the GM, or the dealer to sit down long enough to understand the impact on this business. And in terms of how we overcome it, check back with me in a year, Scott. I'm still working on it. We're still trying to figure this out every day, buddy. We are. I mean, listen, if I had figured it out, I wouldn't be sitting with this thing behind me. You guys we'd be doing this podcast on a beach someplace, and I'd have a margarita in my hand because, I would have sold this business and been retired by now. But here's the reality of it. This is what makes it fun to me, right? Because I actually truly believe, maybe I'm being naive, but I actually truly believe that we got a higher calling in this at this company. And this is what I talk about every day with my team around here, is this isn't just about helping dealers sell tires. This is truly helping them transform their business into a place where they're going to need it to be in the coming years, or they're really going to be in trouble. And I get jazzed every morning to get up and know that I'm actually helping dealers figure this out. And every day we get up and we talk to another batch of dealers, and we try to get them to see it differently than they've saw it in the past. And sometimes we're successful and sometimes we're not, but we're successful a lot of the time. And this is starting to resonate with a lot of dealers.
Dave,
well, I think you said
to the point, Scott, one of the points that Dave made with respect to parts managers' compensation plans having an impact on tire sales, you are on the mark, my friend. And one of the recommendations that we make very often when we go into work with a parts and service team or on a parts and service project is that we compensate both the service manager and parts manager, maybe not equally because the jobs are two different responsibilities, but the structure is almost, if not virtually identical. It just maybe where percentages change a little bit in terms of how they're compensated, but the structure is the same. So they're on the same page and there's not that instant conflict with respect to how they are compensated for the performance in the service drive, because they both eat off of what happens in the service drive, as you know.
For sure. I mean, to me, Sandy, that's, that's the price of entry, right? I mean, if your service manager and your parts manager aren't on some sort of combined pay plan, then that's step one, is to fix that, because they're both feeding the same result. But when it comes to parts managers, service managers, and even service advisors, because even service advisors' pay plans
absolutely
can be detrimental to selling a low margin item. And, if you talk to, and dealers used to do this all the time, they would, if they had a pay plan that was structured on some sort of gross or profit, they factored out certain items like oil changes, right? We took oil changes out because that would dilute the, we just need dealers to be creative like that, right? We need to say, look, keep the revenue number in for the tire. But if there's some sort of a gross kicker in there, take the tire sale out of the gross kicker calculation, because otherwise it's just going to be punitive. Again, some dealers look at that and say, well, why would I do that? That's not, affecting behavior. What's the behavior you want? Do you want to retain your customers? If you want to retain your customers, then you got to figure out a way to sell more tires. And if the guys on the front line that are tasked with selling more tires, if they don't feel that there's, it's not beneficial for them to do so, then you might as well, take out the hammer and beat yourself over the head with it. I mean, you're not going to get anywhere. So we got to understand what motivates people. We got to understand what motivates our advisors and our managers to want to sell these types of things. So and again, this goes back to what I said earlier was, there's some sort of really macro level, sort of senior management, dealer, GM level decisions that need to be made if dealers are really going to be successful at selling tires. And when I say successful, Sandy, I'm not talking about taking where they are now from 8% market share to 12.
Right.
I believe that dealers can dominate this space. I absolutely believe it, or I wouldn't keep getting up every morning. I believe they can dominate this space because I believe they have a huge advantage that nobody else has, and that's the fact that they did sell the car. And for the first 2+ years of ownership, okay, they've got that customer as a captive audience. They're coming back because the vehicle's still under warranty. It's still got that new car smell, right? I'm coming back to the dealer. I'm coming back to the dealer. That's the dealer's moment of truth. It's that window where you need to be setting that customer up, okay, for what's coming down the road. If they leave that window not believing that you are the only place to get tires because you understand what their vehicle needs, the OEM fitment, any new car nowadays, and I know I'm rambling here, but any new car nowadays, guys, the tire itself is actually engineered into the vehicle. Back in the 70s and even in the 80s, the tire was the last decision the manufacturer made. And that's why you would see cars, back in your Pontiac days, Sandy, you would see a Caprice with some had Firestone, some had Continental, some had Goodyear because they bought, whatever was round and black and the right size.
Yep.
That doesn't work today. The tire, the size, the compound, the sidewall, the sidewall stiffness, all of that stuff is actually engineered into the suspension of the vehicle for ride quality, road noise, all of those things. The only people that can really tap into that level of knowledge is the dealer. If the consumer knew that this expensive Mercedes that I bought is going to ride like crap if I don't put the right set of tires back on it, which is a real story, by the way, then if they knew that, then the guy that can help them make that decision, become their trusted advisor, is the service advisor in the car dealership, not somebody else down the street flipping tires. And we've got such an opportunity to flip the script on this and for dealers to just dominate this space if they just made a few changes in their business.
Well,
You
I think
said
David,
something. Go ahead. Let me say this, Sandy. You just said something very important. I go back to this business 101. I'll throw in marketing 101 and sales 101 with something you just said. The client has to believe that you are the one spot that can make this happen, right?
Right.
And you did a nice educate. All a dealer's got to do is listen to this show. You've explained exactly how it needs to be presented and why it's so important. And that needs to be communicated down through, because you're 100% on. You're not just making this stuff up. It's right. But the reality is, if you want to sell anything, if you want to market anything effectively, if any great business, they have a large percentage of their client base that believes they are the one spot that can solve this problem, help them achieve whatever they want to achieve, help them avoid whatever they're trying to avoid, whatever it might be, right?
Right.
I thought that was genius. You also said something earlier that I want to come back to in a little bit. You got to look at your internal processes and pay plans, things such as that. Not everything aligns. It reminds me of when we would pitch different programs to some of the manufacturers with J&L. And it's weird. The manufacturer, they're so siloed. And what I mean by that is, nope, this is parts and service. This is fixed ops. This is the variable side. A true owner loyalty program doesn't start once the customer has bought the car and they're in this phase of maintenance. That's not an owner loyalty program. That's one element of it. There's a honeymoon phase once they buy the car on how we can nurture that customer and get them more acclimated to what's going on, whether it's the dealership, the car itself, how it works. Then you've got this maintenance phase, and then you've got this pull ahead program. Whereas the OEMs, when you talk to any dealer or manufacturer about an owner loyalty program, it's nothing more than glorified service coupons.
Well, that is a true statement. I mean, that is how, one of the things that we've been able to start to get some real traction, no pun intended, on right now with talking to a number of the different OEMs is realizing that the way this industry on the new car side has gone about marketing tires to consumers needs to change. It's all, and again, this is going to sound a little bit like I'm talking out of both sides of my mouth here when I say it's all price driven, but listen, we've got to be priced right. We've got to realize that. And I want to clarify something that I said in terms of a loss leader. I'm not suggesting that dealers need to give this stuff away. You don't need to lose money on tires. You just can't make a 45% margin on tires like you do all the other parts you got on your shelf. Okay. You can make money on tires. You don't need to give them away for free. But how do the OEs market tires? Buy 3, get 1 free. They all do it. They've been doing it for decades. And once a quarter, they send out a coupon to everybody that's ever bought a car from them ever. And I can attest to that because I'm still getting them from Mercedes, and I haven't owned a Mercedes in 10 years, and I still get them. Every quarter, I get a coupon in the mail that offers me buy 3, get 1 free. I mean, hell, Ford's been doing it for 20 years. And the reality is that the car dealers are not selling any more tires today than they were 20 years ago. So doesn't that tell you something? That method of marketing is not working. It is not working. That's not the problem. Buy 3, get 1 free is not the hook here. All right. People want to get the good value, but they also want to make sure they get the right tire for their car. And the service advisor at a car dealership is not viewed by most consumers as the guy that's going to help them with selling tires. Like you said, Scott, businesses be successful if you help the customer sell a problem. They don't view the service advisor as the tire guy. I mean, I'm going to give you the Cliff Notes version of this story. I did this on my podcast a few months back where I interviewed a good buddy of mine, and I told the story. This guy's been a friend of mine we've been friends for 30 years, and he knows what I do. And I was talking to him the week prior to my podcast, and he just was telling me that he just had 4 tires put on his car. And I said, "Where did you go?" And he mentioned an aftermarket chain that I won't mention in California. And I said to him, I said, "What? The car's 2.5 years old." I said, "Dude, you know what I do for a living. How could you, why wouldn't you take that back to the dealer? And this is what he said to me. And I swear on the Bible, this is what he said to me. He said to me, dealers sell tires? Yeah. He had no clue.
David, it goes back to the education piece.
Exactly, Sandy. Exactly. He had no clue. He did not connect dealer with tires. And we can put all the stacks of tires that we want in our service drive. We can do all that. It's white noise to people.
It's too late, Dave. I got to make a point because you said it before, and I don't want it to be missed by the audience. You have to position not just the dealership as the one place that they can go to get the right tire that's been properly engineered for the vehicle, but the actual people in the dealership have to be perceived and positioned as experts, right? And that needs to start at the sale and delivery point, not when they need the tires. See, if you're not positioning the people in your dealership as experts on what's the best fit for your vehicle in terms of a tire, because it's been specifically engineered that way during sale and delivery, you're playing catch up from that point forward. Okay. And so by the time they get into your service drive and they actually need the first 2 tires that they're going to have to replace, it's too late.
Sell the green, Sandy. Sell the green.
Well, sell on the green when you're taking the client's initial investment in their lease or their purchase. Okay.
Well, you've heard me say this before, Sandy. We have a saying around here called "sell the green," and what that basically means is that you need to be talking tires from the very first point of contact, from the service orientation walkthrough or whatever the dealer's doing. You need to be highlighting the fact that listen, dealers have got state-of-the-art equipment. Most new cars nowadays, I mean, thank God we don't have hubcaps anymore, right? But most new cars today now have aluminum wheels and stuff like that. And let me tell you something: if you don't have the right equipment, you'll scratch that wheel in a minute.
Absolutely.
Dealers
let me tell you something. That you bring
Dave.
up hubcaps. No. Normally, my first instinct was to talk about how Sandy still has his original car with the hubcaps, but that's not where I'm going to go. When I was young and not doing well in school, all right, my dad would constantly tell me that that's what I was going to do for a living. And he'd go like this. No, he'd go like this. And I said, what is that? He told me I was going to be a hubcap screwer owner, and that's it.
Yeah. But again, you go back to the point where it's an education process. It's part of the marketing piece, and that handoff from sales to service, it's been talked about a whole lot over the last 25, 30 years, because I've heard it since I got into the business, that, the introduction into the service department is critically important during the delivery process, or at least the sales process, so that there's a connection made, right? But I think there's also positioning statements that we can use so that we set people up to understand the level of expertise that we bring, how the vehicle's been engineered, et cetera. This is all part of the walk-around presentation, the transition from sales to service. And ultimately, if the service department isn't open when the customer or the client is taking delivery of the vehicle, we've got every tool in the world right now, including the cell phone, to deliver videos. And if you keep it simple and to the point, you can talk about the 3 things that are critically important for your new clients to understand: is that we are experts when it comes to the sale, service, and maintenance of your vehicle. There's 2 things you need to consider. The vehicle's been engineered specifically to the tires that are on your vehicle. So we're experts with respect to that. In the event you do have an issue with a tire, we're the first people you should be calling. Let's just start that process from the giddy up.
Once you take it from there, Sandy, it's, the average dealer, the average consumer, the dealer is going to have 5 to 7 visits likely before tires need to be replaced.
Right.
That's your opportunity. That's the whole sell the green concept.
Absolutely.
Every time the customer comes in, look at their tires, measure their tires. Hey, I got good news for you. Your tires are wearing fine. Your tires are green.
We inspected the sidewalls. We inspected the inner sidewalls as well. Everything looks great, Yeah.
Exactly. And if they do happen to hit a pothole, and they got a tire that's starting to wear a little bit funky, we can sell them an alignment and help prolong the life of the tire. I mean, there's so much good that comes from this, but it does require effort. and it does require a process change. And as we all know, gentlemen, that's not always the easiest thing to get done sometimes with this in our business, but doesn't mean we stop trying, right?
No, but Dave,
So
I think that's the secret sauce for you with the platform, with the Traction platform, is the ability to communicate with the client as they come to the service drive immediately, but also taking into consideration tire wear as it relates to the alignments on the vehicle. I believe that alignments become a massive retention tool, especially with the program that you and I have talked about a lot. I'm not going to let the cat out of the bag here. If anybody wants more information, they could, email or text Dave or myself. We'll share it with them. But alignments become critically important to retention and tire sales.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I
so
think that, go ahead, Scott.
I was going to say, I've got a question along these lines in terms of, really what people can expect if they do this thing the right way. So really my question is going to be, what is the right way to do it? And you guys are kind of touching on it, but what are the type of results they can expect if they do it right with tire sales? And are these results typical? But before you get into that, the show's being recorded live. So we're streaming to Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, different Facebook groups as well, and Twitter. And so some of the comments we don't always see. A lot of the Facebook comments we won't get until we go back in and look at Facebook and we jump on there. So Dave, I encourage you to do that
I will.
on my Facebook channel as well as Move Crush Counts. But YouTube's, LinkedIn, we get those comments right here in this feed. And one of the comments we got from Michael Long, by the way, Michael Long's got a fire pit there. It looks like a perfect spot to smoke a cigar. I don't know if Michael's still hanging on with us, but he goes, labor high margin, tires low margin. You have to look at the big picture, just like you're saying. And this goes back when you were talking about why it's so important. Keep clients coming to you, lower the defection rate.
Yeah.
So I want to make sure we recognize Michael.
No doubt. Michael's on the money. And Dave, it's hard for me to even consider the fact that you're going to replace, 2 tires or 4 tires and not have the need for an alignment at that point in time. And so there's added margin for you with, no additional parts required. It's all labor. So there's nice margins in the alignment piece. And there are ways to actually maximize client retention as well as transactional profitability by properly deploying a plan around alignment sales.
We've talked a lot about tires today, and I know we're getting to the end of the show, but I'll tell you that alignments is quite possibly the biggest missed opportunity that dealers have.
Amen.
I was talking to a dealer this morning before I came in to do this show, and I was actually on with one of my guys, and he was doing a sort of a web demo for this guy, and I heard the question as I was walking past the door, and he asked him 2 questions. He said, how many ROs do you write a day? And the guy said about 80. And then he said, how many alignments do you do a day? And he said 3 to 4. I remember I smiled when I walked by, and I said, well, if my sales guy doesn't sell that one, then I may need a new sales guy. Because I mean, the reality is I haven't talked to him. I'm sure he did, but how could you not? I mean, the reality is that, after scanning close to 30 million cars in the last 7 years, 30 million cars, okay, it's over 100 million tires. I can definitively tell every dealer out there in the country that somewhere between 35 and 37% of the vehicles in your drive every day need an alignment, period. Yep. So if you want to know how many alignments you should be selling, take your RO count and multiply it by 35%. Okay, so this guy should be doing 10 to 15 alignments a day, not 3. And just figure out what that looks like, Scott, in terms of, what does success look like? Forget about tires alone. There's tens of thousands of dollars in incremental gross profit that every dealer could capitalize on by not doing anything other than selling something that customers need and see value in. You don't need to add any more service advisors. You don't need to buy any, another alignment rack. You don't need to hire more technicians, because we all know that finding people right now is a challenge. What I tell every dealer when I'm talking to them is, you can make more money working with me and not have to put one more person in your drive. Not, you just and you don't got to go get a bunch of customers to come back. It's not about retaining customers from that perspective. It's not getting, increasing your RO count. It's just selling stuff to customers that are there already that they need.
Bingo.
You're increasing the transaction value.
Exactly.
So you're hitting one of the levers.
Dave, the math is important, right? So it's not just the 35% number. Like, you got to extrapolate that out, because if you got 1,000 repair orders per month rolling through your shop, you're talking 350 opportunities roughly, and at an average gross profit of, let's say, 85 to 100 bucks, that's $30,000 to $35,000 in additional gross profit, or ultimately total gross profit from alignment sales alone every month.
Right. Exactly. I mean, this should be the easiest thing. But again, it boils down to process, and it boils down to changing people's behavior, right? We have been this industry. We've been very good at. Let me back up. What's the process today that dealers use for, customer comes into the service drive and, we need something. The customer's they're coming in for a warranty repair, and the mechanism that we use to find additional work to sell is through the multi-point inspection, right? It's been around forever and it works, right? We're relying on our technician to find things, and we're relying on the service advisor to present things. And the way that typically happens, if you spend any time in a service drive, which I spend lots of time in service drives, it's my tech says you need ... whatever it is, right? And what I tell people all the time is we got to get away from that, right? Because the consumers are getting smarter than that, quite frankly. I mean, it's sort of like when somebody goes into the F&I office, right? I mean, you see people out in the hallway, just say no, just say no, just say no. Don't let them sell me anything, right? And it's sort of the same thing. I mean, people get it, if we talk to consumers, real consumers, not our family, because our family are in the business with us. Talk to real consumers out there, and they will tell you that they know that if they go to a dealership, they expect to try to get upsold something. That word, upsell, right? And unfortunately, that negative connotation that's associated with that tends to taint real stuff that they need. If a customer came in and knew that their tires were unsafe, most people are not going to drive away on unsafe tires. But the reality is they're not 100% sure they believe that they actually need them. So one of the things that we've focused on with my business is the transparency in that. Okay. Don't have the technician tell the customer what they need. Give the customer the information, let them educate themselves, and let them make an informed decision. Full transparency. So, people that use our product, as you guys know, when they drive in, we send the information directly to the consumer. The advisor gets it as well, but we send it directly to the consumer, and we allow the consumer to then look at what they need and educate themselves, and then make an informed decision. And they do it on this thing. And this is what I talked about earlier in terms of our industry changing and everybody's cheese getting moved. This is how we're going to have to handle everything in our business going forward. We're going to have to be very data-driven, very transparent. We're going to have to put this information in the hands of the consumer and let them buy, as opposed to being sold to. Then if there's one thing that people take away from what I've said today, I challenge every dealer that if you can, whether you're selling cars, selling service, selling parts, whatever you're selling, if you can get the consumer to feel like they're buying, that they're in control of this decision, as opposed to being sold to, you will magically sell more instantaneously. People buy more when they're in that sort of frame of mind, right? When they're not feeling pressured, when they're not feeling like, do I really need this? When the consumer says, when the consumer can see a picture of their tire, they can see, what their tire looks like, and then go, oh, I can see that. There's no tread left there. Then it takes any of the uncertainty out of the decision. They feel empowered. They feel like, okay, these guys have got my best interest at heart here. And they just feel better about the decision process. And when that happens, you'll sell more.
Words matter. I sit here and I think about, we're, as business leaders, we've all had people that we've worked with, and maybe we have to tell someone, hey, this guy's job performance isn't where it needs to be. You never have a talk with them and coach him up here, here, and here, right? And then the bad leader goes out and says, hey, the boss says you need to improve here. And instead of that person taking on and holding the person accountable, they just point the finger over at you and say, you've got to, this guy says you got to fix this, and your performance isn't there. And I sit back and I think the industry loves to sometimes use the wrong word tracks in the sense of, I think of someone with a lot of inequity. And what do? They come in, we blame the prior dealer for the inequity. The money's owed to the bank. It's not the other dealer. We're not paying the other dealer. So, the amount that you still owe the bank is this. There's it does you no good as a dealer to talk about the prior sale. First off, you don't even know the situation on the prior sale. They might have been trading in a car that they were severely upside down in that transaction. And so you bring up the service technician. It goes along the same lines. If I have to hear about, well, this guy says this and this and this, as a consumer, I'm sitting here thinking, well, that's the bad guy. And you're saying technology and the data needs to be the reason for the decision making. And we have that today. Why are we constantly using and pointing fingers at individuals within our stores or industry, right? Rather than just saying what it is.
I mean, if you think about how we sell cars today, right? I mean, the typical, if you've got a good process in selling cars today, the salesperson is there basically just to help guide the consumer through the process. There's so many tools now online available where the consumer can research and educate themselves on the vehicle that they want. They can, with all the photographs. I mean, if you think back to the old days where you had to walk in and the guy had to point you out and show you how everything worked and whatnot, we've really morphed into a different model where the consumer's doing a lot of that heavy lifting now. And that's what they want, quite frankly. I mean, Isn't that at some levels the beauty of Amazon? I mean, I used to ask the question, what's the beauty of Amazon? And everybody says home delivery. Well, there's lots of places that offer home delivery today. You can get home delivery from Home Depot, but it isn't like Amazon. All right. Amazon makes it easy. That's the beauty of Amazon. They make it easy to buy. They make it easy to price shop. They make it easy to comparison shop. They make it easy to return if you get it and you don't like it. Okay. They make it easy for the consumer. It's got nothing to do with delivery and logistics because everybody's doing delivery and has logistics, and thinks they have their logistics things down. But if you've ever ordered something from one of these other retailers online, these brick and mortar retailers like Home Depot and Best Buy and places like that, let me tell you, it's not the Amazon experience. It sucks in a lot of cases. Amazon has figured out a way to do it better. And they've figured, and their primary mission is to empower the consumer with information and let the consumer take themselves on the journey that they want to go down. And we need to figure out how we can take pieces of that. I'm not suggesting we become like Amazon, but we need to take pieces of that are important to the consumer. And then we build that into our processes, both on the front end, on the back end. And by the way, when I say front end, I'm talking about the service department, guys, and the back end in sales. And I think that's going to be the key to dealers' success, in the coming decades is going to be, how can we change this business to be what consumers are going to want or demand?
I would agree, Dave. And, Michael Lowe makes another point here, and I'll just read it real quickly. You guys touched on it, but if service drive education was improved, this would increase sales and retention. He's absolutely right. I think, clearly defining the who and what and how of education, right? So it's who do we need to educate? We need to educate ourselves. Like, let's start with ourselves. Like, we need to get a little bit smarter. We need to educate our people. We also need to educate our clients and our prospects, right? So we talked a little bit about that, making sure we position ourselves as experts. Then we've got to empower them with the tools and the authority to make some smart decisions in the drive. I think your tool is awesome in terms of conveying and communicating and empowering the service advisors in the drive by delivering that information transparently to the consumer. And then ultimately, we got to inspect what we expect, right? So I'm going to issue this challenge to any dealer or GM, FOD, or service director to take a look at 5 vehicles that have gone through your shop that have already been invoiced and are staged for the client to pick up. And go take a look at the tires and the alignment measurements and see, A, was it done? B, was it presented to your client so that they can make a decision? And what does the tire and the alignment look like? Just a quick look and an inspection of a vehicle like that. Just pick 5 every 2-3 weeks. Just go pick 5, pick 3, whatever the case may be, and then ultimately use that knowledge to help improve and inspire your team to do a more effective job. Go take a look right now in your service department and tell me, 1, how many alignment racks do you have? And then 2, how many vehicles are on those alignment racks? Dave, it's the first thing you and I do when we visit stores. Let's go take a look and see, is the alignment rack empty or full? And more than half the time, the alignment rack or racks are empty, which is amazing to me.
Well, and the beauty of some of the things that you're spot on, Sandy, as usual. And the beauty of what you're talking about, though, as we're moving into this sort of next generation of technology, is the things that you're talking about, the process execution, the holding people accountable, the execution of the process. When if I were to put my service manager hat on and I hear myself talking, I'm gonna say, oh, Dave's talking about, I've got 12 guys out there. How am I going to get them all to, be in lockstep? That's a lot of work. These are not easy businesses to run. And I got to, the idea that Sandy talked about in terms of inspecting vehicles, which is a great, thing to do, is to spot check some vehicles periodically. The beautiful part about it with technology today is if you employ the right type of technology, it's going to do all this for you. Again, so it's going to make the service manager's life easier too. Technology, technology should be able to do all of this for you. If you're looking at any technology, forget mine, any technology, if you can't very quickly determine whether or not it's providing value within seconds or 2 at your desk, then you should hit pass. Because that's the very least any technology should do, is provide that level of insight into process execution, adherence, and performance. And the outcome and byproduct of it. At very least, it should give you, real-time data into that, so that you can effectively manage change, which is what we're talking about, is managing change.
Amen.
Improvement. You know what I love about this episode is I had all kinds of questions to ask you. All right. I had all kinds of questions. I know where this is going.
I got them all right here.
And I was sitting there thinking to myself, well, man, you already answered that one. You already answered that one. This was the easiest interview I've ever had to do.
So you got to be careful when you let me talk, guys. It's a good thing. You just ask my wife; she'll tell you.
The funny part, and for the older guys on the screen like Scott, he's even able to duck out and run to the men's room, and I just carry the water for him here.
Sandy, I had to sign off on a 7-figure deal there. That's what that was. That was not a.
That wasn't his aging prostate, dude. That was that was him being a business mogul.
Oh man, you're not kidding.
That will and thank you. Now I got to edit out more stuff on the final episode when we go to drop this on the podcast. They're going to be like, I always tell Steven, I says,
oh, we lost him again.
We just lost him again.
Dave, let me tell you, it is not easy being the guest co-host with SJ, because I know he probably didn't pay the electric bill again. Just the way it goes. But listen, I'm excited to get together with you next week at Business Bourbon and Cigars down at Bonita Springs. Listen, we got an unbelievable crew of dealers and GMs and fixed operations directors coming down. We get to hang with the Brian Kramers and the Ed Roberts and the Tully Williams. So many people coming down. I can't wait. And these topics are things that we're going to hammer on, as you know, over that period of time, because we're going to be with some big brains. And by the way, Scott, don't worry about it. It happens to guys your age all the time.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. What happened to you?
The battery went out on the camera. I had to hurry up and Steven came in here. He's in the background working. I was sitting there thinking, you guys were talking about my break,
Well, it's
I always have to tell
mandatory
Stephen,
age, buddy.
edit this out. Now I got to edit 2 things out. I got to make sure that this is 3 things with the battery that went dead.
Well, we were talking
But
about
first
business
off,
bourbon and cigars next week, and I said we'll
yeah,
hammer these topics again because we'll have some big brains down there, some people that are really getting it done, guys that I learn from every time we get together.
I'm really looking forward to it, guys. I haven't been excited about going on an event in a long time like I am about this one. I'm looking forward to seeing all the guys, you guys, but also the guys that you mentioned, Sandy, as well. And
Yeah.
and just know that Tully and I are going to be off in one wing doing our little chant for service, right? So let's make sure that the whole thing isn't about selling cars. Let's put a little
we've got
sprinkle a little fixed
you playing your air drums and Tully playing his air guitar and Michael Porro doing Rapper's Delight by the Sugar Hill Gang every single time. Man, that's like one of the things I look forward to the most.
Well, it'd be good.
I'm looking like the last time.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to going there. I'm looking forward to showing everybody. By the time we get there, my company will have officially launched our rebrand. So Beautiful. I'm excited about that. For those of you, it's maybe the worst kept secret in the world, but we are rebranding the company starting the 1st of February with a new name called Traction.
I love it.
With an X. And we're going to be sort of, we're going to be sort of phasing out the name Tire Profiles because we've become so much more than just tires with our products. So we sort of felt like we needed a new fresh face on it and to sort of tell people that we were more than just tires. So we're going to be I'll be able to share our new look and logo with everybody when I'm down there, and it'll be fun. I can't wait, guys.
Well, Dave, I'm going to say
just so you know,
as a third party, I'm going to say it for you that it's if we oversimplified it and talk just about tires, the platform itself is such an incredible mechanism to communicate and deliver relevant information in literally snap of a finger to service drive clients. I think it's the horsepower behind what you guys do. And any dealership that's out there that is not utilizing the Traction platform is missing a hell of an opportunity because the ROI is stupid.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate it. I love those kinds of commercials, especially when they don't come from me. So that's it's great to hear other people talking about us like that. I appreciate that, buddy.
No worries.
And I've brought up Business 101, Marketing 101, and Sales 101. I'd like to bring up a little 102. You had mentioned it was the worst kept secret about your rebrand. When you rebrand, you don't want it to be a secret. So it's probably good.
We're working on it. We're working on it. It's amazing how much work goes into this. So it's crazy. But look, I'm looking forward to seeing all of you guys, and appreciate Sandy, appreciate all your kind words, and Scott, I appreciate you putting this together, and I also appreciate that some people might not know this, but you're also a customer of mine. At your Honda stores. So we're happy to be at your service, and hope we're doing a good job for you guys out there. I'm sure the team is, but I can't wait to see you guys next week. It's going to be a blast, and looking forward to catching up with everybody that's going to be there.
Amen.
So I want to thank Dave for an incredible interview, and I'm sure all the business leaders that are paying attention here and tuned into this episode, I'd like to think they learned a lot about client retention. And I don't think you have to be in the auto industry only to learn. I think we can learn sometimes more from paying attention to other industries than we can our own.
Yes, sir.
This was a great example today. I brought up the who moved our cheese, but it was really about, understanding the lifetime value of your customer, paying attention to the data, not with closed mind tunnel vision like we've done, but opened eyes and think, wow, maybe this is the key to better client retention. Every industry's got situations like that. Every industry's got products that they're like, we don't make a lot of money on that, but there's cross-selling and upselling opportunities within those projects or products, like you've mentioned, the alignments and things such as that. But I agree with you 100% on the client retention. It's something that I don't believe a lot of people. I think the OEMs their eyes are open to this. There's a reason they push tire sales a lot to it.
I know we're wrapping up here, but Scott, you asked me a question I never really answered, which was, how big is the opportunity? I'm just going to say this: I've just put the final touches on a white paper on a pretty good size Honda dealership that started with us. And we've been tracking their lift in tire sales, alignment sales, brakes, brake pad replacements, and rotor turns and replacements. Those 4 items we've been tracking. And let me just say that everybody's stock portfolio should look like these graphs. It's impressive to see. And some of the biggest increases they've seen is in the area of brakes. Good things happen when you take the wheels off, boys. Good things happen. You find other work to be done. If anybody's interested in this white paper, all they got to do is reach out to me. I'm happy to send it to anybody that wants. They can connect with me on LinkedIn. Anybody wants to email me. My email is dboyle, B-O-Y-L-E, @tireprofiles with an S on the end of it.com. Send me an email. I'm happy to send you this business case and white paper that we put together, because it really does show the power of focusing on the tire and the things that can be sort of drug along with it from an alignment perspective, brakes, and other around the wheel type work. Huge opportunities. I mean, we're talking about a store that increased their fixed coverage by almost 30% in 12 months. So, I mean, and any dealer can do this. It's not special. It's not rocket science. It's just a matter of focusing on that aspect of the business. So anybody that's interested in that, just drop me a note. I'm happy to send it to you.
All right. So everybody, once again, I am Scott Joseph. I want to thank Sandy Ceramis, the solutionist, for joining us again on this episode. I want to thank our client retention expert, Dave Boyle, for sharing with us. I want to thank all the business leaders who tuned into this episode, the Move Crush Count audience, for joining us. If you want more information about Dave, about Tire Profiles, soon to be Traction, you can go to tireprofiles.com. We've got it scrolling here on the bottom of the screen.
Yep.
And that's currently the right address, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yep. You can go to traction.com too, but either one. And it's got an X in it. TRAXTION. Correct.
And so I want to make sure that the audience make sure they follow us and subscribe to us at Move Crush Count. For the podcast, you can go to movecrushcount.com for that. Also, you can follow us on YouTube, Instagram, Twitter. Make sure you join our Facebook groups. Dave is a member of our Facebook group along with our group on LinkedIn. He can answer any questions you might have there as well. Make sure you subscribe to movecrush.com. That keeps you up to date on all future guests and new episodes. And once again, today's interview was sponsored by J&O Marketing, a digital marketing agency helping business leaders outsmart and outmarket their toughest competitors, not outspend them. The reality is your marketing can perform better, and you want an agency that specializes in deep data, marketing strategy, and campaign management. So I want you to check out J&O Marketing so you can enjoy the excitement that comes when you move the crowd, crush the competition, and count the money. Now, before we end, I'm going to play a little. You guys brought up the Business Bourbon and Cigar event. We got a little video.
Sold out, by the way, Scott. Sold out for the 3rd straight event. Sold out.
That is true.
Oh,
it is sold out. So here we go. And Dave, I think you're in here, so I don't know. We'll see.
Coming here, I was looking at some of the subject matter, and I was like, I don't know I'm going to get a lot out of this. In the first session this morning about inventory, it made my 3 days worth the trip.
I love being around like-minded people, but most importantly, I want to develop a relationship with industry professionals that I truly respect. I love their knowledge, what they can bring to the table. If you want to learn more and push yourself and get outside of your comfort zone, this is the place to be.
All right.
Thank God there was no video from the buses. That's all I'm going to say.
Hey, for anybody that's going next week, make sure you get on the right boat. Okay, you need to be on the right bus. With yours truly in Louisville, in Bonita Springs, you better get on my boat if you want to have fun.
if I had a nickel for every attendee that has texted me seeing if they could RSVP on my boat, they would, I could retire after this event.
Well, you don't live too well if all you need is 20 or 30 nickels, buddy.
For anyone listening, this is a little snippet of what this is going to be like next week. So, you'll learn a little bit, you can smoke a little bit, you can drink a little bit, and you get a little sideshow on the side. We got, Jackie and Shecky here doing their stand-up piece.
All right, guys. I appreciate everyone's time today. Thank you all for tuning in. Have a
Thanks,
great
guys.
day.